The gospel text assigned for this day comes from the Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 10, verses 25 to 37. Just then, a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" And the lawyer answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend." Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? He said, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." May God add richest blessing to this reading and our understanding of God's holy word. I normally do not agree to supply preach without first reading the assigned text for the day. However, Rick has been such a good friend for all these years, and he was going on vacation, so I automatically said yes. And then when I read today's gospel lesson, I wondered what in the world there was to say about this parable that we have heard so many times. It is perhaps the most familiar parable in all of the Bible. Even people who have never set foot in a Christian church know what a Good Samaritan is. There are even national laws in many countries called the Good Samaritan Law. I quote this from the internet, that these laws allow people to offer legal protection, or these laws offer legal protection to people who give reasonable assistance to those who are injured, ill, in peril, or otherwise incapacitated. In some cases, and this according to the internet, in China, there is a Good Samaritan law that even encourages people to help those who are wounded and in need of help. With such an international understanding of the meaning of Good Samaritan, how does one find something new and innovative to preach to a group of people who've probably heard this since their childhood? Or perhaps a better question is this parable still relevant or even practical in today's world? As I read and studied the parable, I began to wonder how Jesus might have told this parable differently if he were here in this country, where times and attitudes have changed. Would he have changed the circumstances or the characters? Would he have made qualifications in view of our litigious society? Might the story have begun something like this? A certain man was hiking down the Blue Ridge Parkway when he was attacked by a biker gang and left for dead. Would the other characters have changed as well? How would we have responded if the passers-by had been changed to a Catholic priest and a Moravian minister? Or what if the Samaritan were changed to a Muslim, or a secular humanist, or a gay man? Would we have been as shocked and offended as Jesus' original first-century Jewish hearers were? Would we have responded the way we do today, thinking that we are the good guys, we are the ones who would be the good Samaritans? But Jesus was not simply teaching about hospitality to strangers in this paragraph. The hospitality and Levitical social code were filled with rules and regulations about how strangers and those in need were to be treated. Jesus didn't need to teach them that. They already had plenty of laws for that. Jesus was trying with this parable to challenge stereotypes and prejudice. What does it mean to be a good neighbor? How does this relate to loving God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our mind, and with all of our strength? What does it have to do with loving our neighbors as ourselves? When this parable is studied today in seminary, the focus is frequently based on what we call historical or sociological criticism, in which there are mitigating factors about why the priest and the Levite did not stop and render aid. Believe it or not, there were very valid reasons why they didn't do so. But to rationalize the story in this way makes us no better than the lawyer who asked the question, who wanted only to justify himself. And it misses the whole point of Jesus' encounter with him and the point of the parable. Remember, the lawyer was trying to test Jesus and his teachings. So Jesus, rather than take the bait, turned the tables and tested the intention and the faith of the lawyer. As we read this story today, we're called upon to individually examine our own life, our own faith, and our own prejudices. We are called upon to look at our own reactions to those in need that we pass by on a daily basis. In a day and age when it takes no longer to fly halfway around the world to the country where the Samaritan lived than it did for him to walk from his home country up the Jericho road and back home, we must look at our reaction to daily seeing people lying on the sides of roads, dying of starvation, curable diseases, endless wars, and in general, humanity's inhumanity to one another, both in our own community and in the community of our world. Whether it's on the side of Interstate 40 or on the side of a road in the Congo, how often do we possibly see a dangerous situation and decide that we don't have time to stop and offer assistance? Have any of us ever seen someone in distress and thought the situation too dangerous to our own well-being to stop and help? How often do we send a check or donate a few items to soothe our consciences so that we can then forget about the hungry, the displaced, the marginalized in our world? How often do we fail to help our neighbor or even our brother or sister in Tanzania with the tired old excuse that there are so many people in Winston-Salem that need our help. Why should we help people in faraway lands that we don't even know? Now, all of these considerations hold some truth. We really are doing a lot for our neighbors here at home and sending checks and the occasional missionary to a foreign country. But are we really doing all that we can to help our neighbors here at home? Or is that just a rationalization like those used by the priest and the Levite, who thought that somebody else would probably come along and help the man on the side of the road? Our reality in today's global world is that everyone is now our neighbor. We can be instantly connected to people all over the world through TV and the internet. In fact, I correspond more with people on the other side of the world than I do with my own friends here in Winston-Salem. I know more about their needs than I do about the needs of some of my brothers and sisters sitting here this morning. But we who consider ourselves a Christian nation, we who would like to think that we would be the Good Samaritan in the story that Jesus told, must look at our hearts and decide whether we are just rationalizing and justifying our actions, or whether there is indeed some way we can help our neighbors around the world. True, we can't help everyone, and sometimes there is very little that we can do about some situations. But Jesus calls us to do what we can. Note that not only did the Samaritan stop, he came near to the man on the side of the road. He went close enough to see the extent of the man's injuries. And when he saw the wounded man, he was moved with pity. He didn't just look with a blind eye, he saw what the man needed and did what he could. He didn't have a doctor's bag along with him, so he used what he had, some oil and some wine, to clean the wounds and to stop the infection. We need to be willing to go and see where people are in need. I have been very, very fortunate to have the opportunity to go and see some of the need of this world. And frankly, I have been shocked at some of the things I have seen. But what that has done for me has made me feel more connected to my brothers and sisters around the world. And I care now what happens in Tanzania. I care now when I hear about women being raped in the Congo. I care now when I see children in school and know how hungry they must be. Once we go near and see the suffering of our neighbors, we are no longer able not to care. But we don't need to go to foreign lands to see the plight. We can pay attention when we watch the news and listen with open hearts instead of with jaded minds. We need only to go somewhere like Diggs Latham School to see what hunger looks like. We need only to go to Sunnyside Ministry to see how vast the needs of the people are in our community, and to know that the situation is even worse in many countries where we have Moravian churches. Even the lawyer who wanted to test Jesus with his questions had to admit that the one who showed mercy, the one who stopped and looked, was the true neighbor, the one who obeyed God's law, God's command that we love God with all of our being and that we love our neighbors as ourselves. When we allow ourselves to see the true condition of our neighbors, we are called, like the Good Samaritan, to do what we can, not what we can't. We are called to use whatever resources we have. If we have wine and oil to clean a wound, that's what we should use. If we have some conveyance that we can take people from the place of their suffering to a place where they can get help, that's what we're called to use. And whatever financial resources we have, as little as 2 denarii or 2 days' wages might be all that is needed to get someone back on their feet and back into living life fully again. It's not so much how much we give, but how much we seek to do God's will that shows our gratitude and our love for God and for our neighbors. To do what we would hope someone would do for us if the situation were reversed. Even our whole Moravian church cannot save the whole world. It is obvious to me we're not really doing a very good job even of saving our brothers and sisters in the places where we are building new churches. But that's a place where we can start, a place where we can go and meet people face to face and see what the needs are and begin this process of healing in our world. We have Moravian churches now in 21 provinces, 5 mission provinces, and 17 mission areas. And weekly I try to count how many countries that is, but the truth is I can't keep up with it. Because every time I think I've found out where all of our churches are being started, a new country gets added on, a new country gets promoted to being a province, and there's some new area with great needs. We are starting churches in places such as Belize, Sierra Leone, Burundi, Nepal, Cuba, Uganda, French Guiana, Zanzibar, Kenya, Albania, Peru, Mwanza, Ruvumba, Njombe, Mtwara, Grenada, Rwanda, Latvia, and with the Garifuna Indians in Honduras. And if there are places I named that you don't know where they are, it's time to get out a map and learn where your neighbors are. Because not only are your neighbors there, your Moravian brothers and sisters are there, and many of them are suffering. And the reality is that unlike America, where we have income that we can use to help others, in many of these places, the poverty in the country is so great, there is no one there to help them the way we can help through Sunnyside or crisis control. For the amount of money it costs for me to go to the movie and buy a box of popcorn, no drink, just popcorn and a movie, I can provide a girl with a uniform that allows her to go to school for a year where she would not be denied entrance without that uniform. For the price of that movie, I can buy a tent to send to an African or Caribbean country that might prevent the 4 or 5 children sleeping in the same bed from getting malaria, a curable and treatable disease that tens of thousands of children die from every year, for the cost of going to a movie and a box of popcorn. We have at our disposal the means and the opportunity to reach out to our neighbors around the world. I don't expect everyone to do everything they possibly can. But when God puts someone on your path, I expect that God expects you to stop and see and help in whatever way you can. Today's gospel is the first in a series of 2 stories that Jesus told to illustrate what it means to love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. The next text is the story of Mary and Martha. And in that story, Jesus chastises gently Martha for complaining that Mary is sitting and listening to Jesus. And Jesus says to Martha in that story, Mary has chosen the better part. For you see, simply doing all the time is not the answer to the problem. We must first sit and listen to the teachings of Jesus so that we know where and how God is calling us to help those in need. We cannot do it all, but each of us can do our part, and we can stop justifying ourselves the way the lawyer did and start asking ourselves and asking God what it is that we can do to make this a better world. In an increasingly global world, the definition of neighbor continues to expand. The call to discipleship continues to become more complex, and the love of God continues to show us how to love with our whole beings so that this world might be filled with more love and less violence, hate, and indifference. I don't know if I've told you anything new that you didn't know about this parable this morning, but what I do hope is that I have awakened you just a little bit, helped to open your eyes so that you can see and hear the plight of a world crying out for good news, for the blessing of Jesus Christ. With Paul, I pray for all of us, asking that we might be filled with the knowledge of God's will in all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so that we may lead lives worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to Him, as we bear fruit in every good work and as we grow in the knowledge of God. Amen.